I declare the meeting open and welcome you to this month's meeting of Council. The recording of this Council meeting will be available to the public on Council's website for a minimum period of 6 months. In accordance with Council policy, I will now ask staff to confirm that the recording has commenced.
Yes, it has, Mayor.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the South East Nation, the Malacca people of the Yuan River and the Linnaquani people of Far South. We recognise their continuous connection to land, water and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past and present. In attendance tonight we have Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Jessup, Councillor Temby, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Camber-Smith and Councillor Burgess. General Manager, would you like to introduce your staff?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We've got the Director, Governance, Strategy and Sustainable Development, Matthew Grimsey, our Director, People and Corporate Services, David Spinks, and the Director, Infrastructure, Climate and Environmental Services, Lachlan Krantz, our Media and Communications Coordinator, Kelly Davis, and Executive Assistant, Sandy Rustell.
Thank you. Apologies. We have an apology tonight for Councillor Gibson. We have no leave of absence to record and no absent. Councillors, do you wish to declare any interest tonight? No, thank you. Confirmation of minutes. Do I have a councillor to move the minutes as circulated are confirmed for the ordinary meeting of Council 24th of May 2023 and the special meeting of Council on Wednesday the 7th of June 2023. Do I have a councillor to move that, please? Councillor Jessup. A seconder. Councillor Burgess. Do any councillors wish to report any changes? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors and the motion is carried. Legislative items. General Manager, are there any legislative items?
No, Mayor.
Any urgent matters?
No, Mayor.
I do have one announcement and it was on our Facebook page and on our website, but the Yuan Valley Council's Food Hub project has been shortlisted as a finalist in the 2023 National Economic Development Awards for Excellence. And there's only 3 nominated, and that is the City of Barongardara and Livingstone Shire Council in Queensland. So well done to the all involved. Public question time. Oh yes, public question time 8.1.1. Answers to the questions taken on notice. There was one question taken on notice at May's council meeting from Amy Robinson and the response is on our website and included in the minutes. 8.1.2, questions on notice. There was a question given on notice from Joe Goodman, Demetra, Alice, Tona and Jeffrey Swan. As previously mentioned, the questions given on notice and the responses can be found on the website and in the minutes. Okay. 8.1.3, there was questions without notice via email were Amy Robinson, Irene Swan, Yuan Valley Residents and Ratepayers Association and John Diment. As previously mentioned, the questions and the responses can be found on the website and will be included and are included in the minutes. Okay, so from the gallery. If you have a question, as the chair, I'll ask you to come forward to the microphone and identify yourself by name and area where you live. This To make things fair and equitable, we have a limit to 2 questions per person, and we normally allocate 15 minutes for question time. All questions must be directed to me as the chairperson, and I will either answer the question or refer it to the General Manager. Debate cannot be entered into, and is there anyone that would like to come forward and ask a question? Yes, if you'd like to come forward, Mr. Sins. Yes, yes, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Pat Singh from Lymington on behalf of the Huon Valley Residents and Ratepayers Association. So, facing the prospect of a significant rate rise over the next 2 years, our association has sought to know what is driving these increases and to better understand whether or not they seem appropriate and to better understand councillors' appreciation of the matters. During that process, we became aware that Council expects its cash position at the end of June 2023 to be around 6 million or 50% better than projected, and that more than half of this amount is carried forward into the 10-year plan. That outcome was a surprise to us, and we have accordingly asked how this occurred and what are the implications, if any, for the programmed rate rises. To do this, we had to venture into the details of financial results and projections, which is certainly not an area of expertise for most of our members, nor perhaps our councillors. And so we sought answers to a number of questions, and we appreciate the response from the General Manager sent to us yesterday. This has certainly improved our understanding, but some of our questions have not been answered, and we will seek further clarification. We will therefore take up the suggestion from the General Manager to meet with the Director of People and Corporate Services, David Spinks, in order to gain the understanding we seek. So, through you, Mayor, Havra would like to ask the General Manager, do you agree that the budget discussion between councillors at the June meeting and perhaps the outcome might have been quite different if they had been fully aware that Council was now forecasting an increase in its cash and cash equivalents of 50% from the projected 12 million to 18 million, and that more than half of that 6 million was forecast to remain in cash reserves for the next 10 years?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Sins.
Thank you.
As far as the councillors knowing, we've had multiple workshops, and yeah, we did know about that. But
You knew about the 18 million?
I'll pass it on to the General Manager.
As was in the correspondence, we have had 6 workshops, and in every instance we've talked about what the cash flow projections are using our long-term financial plan modelling. While we acknowledge the cash reserves are growing, we also acknowledge that there's an 8.11% price increase that we, like everyone across the economy, are experiencing. We have a deficit situation that needs to be rectified.
We understand all that.
And we also have had services that haven't been funded appropriately. And injecting money back into those services has seen positive trends. The community sentiment, I think, is speaking positively around where we're directing those funds. So I guess largely for us to be a sustainable organisation, the rate increase is necessary.
We've seen all those arguments and understand them. And that isn't actually answering the question. Was it, do you feel the outcome might have been different if councillors had been made fully aware of the change in the projected cash reserves of 12 million to 18 million between the May meeting, when it was projected that there would be 12 million, and the June meeting, when it said with no explanation that it was suddenly 18 million. Now, I'm not suggesting there's anything untoward, I'm just suggesting that perhaps councillors might have taken that into account during their discussion.
I obviously can't talk
No.
on behalf of councillors.
I agree it is a
Mr.
somewhat
Singe, so
hypothetical question.
I think my recommendation and the recommendation wouldn't have been any different. We have looked to
Oh,
make
I'm
sure.
sure your recommendation would have been the same, but
Yep.
we can't enter into debate, as the Mayor was about to tell me, so we might just leave it there.
Thank you. Can I? Yes. Yes, that's fine. Yes, you may.
Can I just also add that the figure of $12 million that you're referring to was not a figure at May 2023. The projection of $12 million was a figure more than 12 months ago when we were putting together the 22-23 budget. So to say that between May 23 and when we approved the budget just 3 weeks ago, that our cash reserves went from 12 to $18 million is just not a correct statement. What we found was our cash balances at the end of the prior financial year were higher than expected, and that's primarily because of, it's a whole bunch of things, as you can imagine, that contribute to a cash position at any point in time, but they were primarily around some capital grants that we received that we weren't expecting or budgeting for, and also the fact that the Commonwealth Financial Assistance grants were paid in advance. Now, that's been the case for quite a number of years now, but generally they've been sort of paid 50% in advance, so brought forward one financial year. Last year we found, after we'd set the budget, the federal government approved them to come forward 75%. And indeed, just last week, for next year, the federal government's going to pay 100% of those grants in advance. So the entirety of next year's grants we'll be receiving in the next day or two. So what that means is, in the budget papers that have just been approved, we've got a cash projection in there, but already I expect that to be different to that. So it's not indicating windfall, it's not indicating savings, it's not anything of that nature. It's just a whole bunch of issues at any point in time can contribute to a cash balance.
Thank you.
I look forward very much to meeting with you when we can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Do I have anyone else with a question? Yes. You come forward, please.
Caleb Elcock from Dover. So my question is, when we eventually go across the new planning system, what happens to development applications that are still being assessed or waiting for further information?
Yep. Okay, I'll pass that through you, General Manager, to the Director.
Those applications that have been lodged under the current scheme will be assessed under the current scheme.
Okay.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions from the gallery? Yes, you can come forward. Thank you.
Can I do a postscript and ask, what about DA applications that aren't deemed accepted, fully accepted at that point? So applications lodged in the system perhaps for some time with requests for further information. And I guess maybe that's an uncertain area that it might be beneficial for community to hear some guidance on from council.
Thanks. But you didn't say who you was, did you, Amy?
Oh, I didn't. Amy Robertson from Port Huon. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. There are two parts to it. The first part is whether it is deemed to be a valid application. So a valid application has some minimum requirements which are set out in the Land Use Planning Approvals Act and in the planning scheme. Traditionally, that an application form that is signed has necessary consents if there's council or Crown land required, copies of certificates of title and so forth. It's not necessarily a high bar to get over, or once it's valid, and that's the test, they'll be dealt with, as I said, under the scheme at the time that they're lodged. With respect to those that are on further information, if they're already valid, then the further information will be done in respect to the original application. So that'll be assessed as at the time from when it was the scheme applying from when it was lodged.
Thank you.
That was a postscript. Do you mind if I ask my question now?
Is there anybody else that's got a question from the gallery? Yep.
I'm on the same.
Okay.
I'm on the same train. I'm on
All
the same
right.
train. DAs. So, with regard to council's planning and resourcing in this area, we see how many DAs are received and decided in monthly reports, but how many are there in the pile? So, how many valid DAs does council hold to assess, and how many applications yet to be determined valid are sitting in council's receipt?
Through you, directed to. Yeah, through you.
Through you, Mayor, that was provided as an answer to your question from the last council meeting. So as at 22nd of June, there are 189 applications lodged that don't have decisions. Most of the outstanding applications are awaiting further information to be provided.
Okay, do I have somebody else that yes, you come forward, please.
My name's Doreen Splinsky from Signet. I note in the papers that under point 15.025, there's a report to the Tasmanian Planning Commission about the high-level planning policies that they developed.
Oh, that's okay.
My question is, did Council, in its role as Planning Committee, approve that document?
Through to you, Director.
Through you, Mayor, it's on the agenda for Council to approve tonight.
It's already been sent, I understand, has it?
It's been sent as a draft. If there are any changes that are to be made, we'll be submitting those changes to the Tasmanian Planning Commission. It's just that the due date was the 26th of June.
It was due yesterday. Yeah, well, Monday it was due. Well, my second question is that the report criticises the Tasmanian Planning Committee about lack of consultation with councils. That report has been circulating for 3 months. I noticed that Councillor, Jenny Cambridge-Smith actually gave an independent reply many, many weeks ago. There's another comment in the document that actually talks about wanting to know what the background or the references that were used within the paper. Circulating before the last paper was a document which was actually asking for comments and going through the background of, in fact, I think there's 2 other policies or documents that were circulated for comment. Given that Council has criticised the Tasmanian Planning Commission for not having more discussions with councils, can I ask, is there any particular reason Council did not choose to advertise this document or circulate it to relevant groups or individuals within the community, given that it's an extraordinarily important document?
Thank you very much. Can I go through to you?
Through you, Mayor, I'm not aware in the submission that's being put forward about criticising the Commission in relation to its engagement processes. You may be referring to the original submission that was attached to a discussion paper on 1 November 2022, which is included as an attachment, which provides some background for the information that we provided before, but certainly there's no criticism that I'm aware of in that submission of the Tasmanian Planning Commission and their engagement through the process.
So there are actually 2 responses, one from December 2022. I'm not aware that I saw that submission on the summary of the Tasmanian Planning Commission site, where actually documented everything that had been said, all the respondents.
Through you, Mayor, I can only refer to the previous submission that was included as page 68 of the attachments. That was 1 November in relation to the draft planning policies back then. That was just in. I can only refer to page 68 of the attachments, which includes the letter which was sent on the 1st of November 2022 to the Tasmanian Planning Commission when they were last sent out for engagement before the formal process. But the current submission doesn't have anything in relation to lack of engagement.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Yes, Councillor Temby?
Just that there was a second part to the question, which was, has council, is there a reason council did not advertise to the relevant groups?
Thank you.
Sorry, council doesn't advertise on engagement of the Tasmanian Planning Commission.
Okay, do we have any other questions from the gallery? Okay, thank you. 8.2, deputation and addresses to council. Are there any? Okay, petitions, are there any?
No, Mayor.
Planning, there's no planning reports tonight. So we'll go on to general reports. Are there any councillors tabling their activities tonight?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. 11.006/23. Do I have a councillor to move a motion that the general reports and minutes for the period 1 to 31 May 2023 be received and noted? Councillor Armstrong, seconded. Councillor Canberra-Smith. Is there anyone that wants to speak to that? No? Anyone else with a question? Yes, Councillor Temby.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few questions. In the community wellbeing section, liaising with community halls regarding changes in insurance fees and permits. Was this regarding the email to hall committees advising that council's insurance will no longer insure an event where alcohol is consumed?
We don't have the acting director here tonight, so can we take that one and take it on notice? Thank you.
And the second question is communications and media. Request for a quote on communications and engagement strategy was sent out. Is this something that we should be considering within the context of the Future of Local Government review? The information pack outlines community advisory panels, and I think that that could be something that we could incorporate in our communication and engagement strategy. If we look at what they're recommending, if we adopt something which is consistent with what the future may well hold, which is these community advisory panels, it might be a worthwhile thing to consider within our strategy.
We'll take that one. Yeah, it's in that area, unless you'd like to.
Yeah, the expression of interest process we've gone through is to get someone to support us through that strategy work, so we can incorporate your thoughts in there.
Will councillors be provided with an implementation plan for Part G of Motion 16.10 regarding the financial management strategy, long-term financial plan and the adoption of the council estimates and budget? Point G says council will work on reassessment of rates distribution methodology and in particular advertise a contact point to councillors for suggestions to reduce services. So how are we going to implement that, and have we got an implementation plan?
Through to you, General Manager. Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't prepared an implementation plan at this stage, Councillor Tembley, but we will come back and share that with you.
Thank you. And congratulations on the Huon Valley Medical Services for successfully attracting the Strengthening Medicare grants of Dover $25,000 and Geeveston $25,000. Has there been any discussions with the Rural Workforce Agency, HR Plus, about our options for medical centres? And if so, when will councillors be briefed?
I'll take that one on notice, and we'll get Lyle to follow that up with you.
Thank you. And climate, the climate adaptation strategy is to be developed via the regional climate change initiative. Workshops will be scheduled to begin this process before 30 June 2023. Has a workshop been scheduled?
No.
Hi.
So last month, at the last council meeting, I spoke of the motion that I put in March, which was now a resolution of council, which is that Huon Valley Council writes to the Department of State Growth, Secretary Kim Evans and Kingborough Council Mayor Paula Reid, requesting their support for the state government to fund a pilot project for a regional approach to road safety. And then I requested, because we haven't received any response from the state government, I requested a letter be sent to the Minister, State Growth, and has the Mayor or General Manager or staff discussed this matter with any Member of Parliament or their staff to gain direction on this motion? And if so, what was the advice provided? And when will the Mayor or General Manager proceed to advance this council resolution?
Okay. Okay, can I pass that through to you, Director?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Temby. DSG this week advised us that they do want to engage with us on the project. So I'll be reaching out to them this week to kick that off.
Thank you. The next one is the audit panel has said that the Tasmanian Audit Office has not presented information or strategy that can be presented to the audit panel to allow the panel to consider in timely fashion. Does the Tasmanian Audit Office normally charge council for the external auditor function? If not, will the Tasmanian Audit Office be paying for this function to be provided to council?
I can put that through to the Director, please.
Yes, I can answer that one. So, at the audit panel, I advised the panel that the Tasmanian Audit Office had contracted out our audit to a subcontractor who will be Ruddick's Chartered Accountants out of Launceston. Because of this changeover, we haven't received the audit strategy for this financial year as yet, but I'm advised that's very close, it's coming, so Ruddick's will be preparing that, but my understanding is it'll be issued on a Tas audit letterhead and coming from them. So yes, we do pay for external audit services. We will be paying Tasmanian Audit Office and they will be paying Ruddick's. Was there another part to that question? Sorry.
I said, does the Tasmanian Audit Office normally charge council for the external audit function? Is that a normal?
Yes, they most certainly do.
Thank you. And the emerging risk register, I have a question there.
Yes. Yeah, do we?
Oh,
Well,
that's
that one
all
will
right.
come up.
That's all right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Do we have any other questions? Yes, Councillor Cambersmith.
Thank you. I was very interested in the minutes from the Health and Wellbeing Committee. Some very interesting discussions there, and in particular the write-up from the Health Consumers Tasmania workshop, which has some extremely interesting ideas there. And I wondered if Councillor Jessup, as the chairman of that committee, if you know what the follow-up from those activities might be, what Health Consumers Tasmania plan to do with that feedback and consultation that they've had there.
Yes, yes.
Their representative wasn't at the last meeting, so I think we just tabled it and didn't follow through with it. But again, that probably is one that we can put on notice for
The acting director.
when he's back, because I
Yeah.
know they were doing some, it was being incorporated in their thoughts about medical centres and stuff like that. So we could put that on notice maybe for Lyle.
Thank you.
It concerns me that we seem to be, as government seems to be spending an awful lot of money on funding Health Consumers Tasmania, but less in actually actioning the outcomes of their consultations. And I'd like us to sort of pursue that if we might. I just had one other comment really, and possibly an action for the future is that I notice again there's been another 2 or 3 whole residence short stay accommodation conversions come through in the planning. It's becoming more and more of a concern in the Huon Valley in the light of the housing crisis, and I'd like us as a council at some point to, consider what can be done about, or at least reviewing the effect of short stay accommodation on housing affordability in the municipality, and whether there are any planning controls that we could enact. Thank you.
I think that you can request maybe a discussion on that at a later date. Is that yeah? If you'd like to do that.
Yes, and I know Clarence has brought it up as well under the LGAT thing later on, so I was interested to see that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other? Yes, Councillor Jessup.
Thank you, Mayor. I note in the General Manager's report the success of the Jobs Hub Expo, which I thought was very nice. I did manage to get a couple of lovely hats, one from our 2 salmon providers, but I was going to give them to a couple of our council members a bit later. It was good to see council there representing council and a few other businesses, but yeah, hopefully that will grow over time with more businesses being involved. But congratulations to the people. I know I've been quite strong in wanting to see some outcomes from that committee, so that's good. The second question relates to the planning comment on page 5 of the combined reports. So it's probably through you, Mayor, to the Director. It mentioned that a consultant had been brought in to look at heritage sites that may be of interest. I have done a little bit of reading through the LPS process on the nomination of heritage sites through my own personal interest. And one of the comments in the sort of background reading is a necessity to have strong community input to identify sites, places and buildings of interest. So I'm not sure if you can answer this on the spot, but I'm just wondering did that consultant do any community consultation or work with local groups to identify places of heritage value? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, this was a preliminary exercise only, so there was no community engagement or anything. It was basically an exercise to see all those which prima facie would fit within a heritage process. We would then need to go through processes with those landowners after going through history backup and those sorts of things. We haven't considered how we would engage the community as yet. That does come with a lot of sensitivities because a lot of the land that may be raised as heritage is private land, so it brings council into some very strong potential for conflict.
As opposed to just making a list without consulting people, which would definitely bring us into conflict.
Through you, Mayor, the list will be consulted directly with the landowners and certainly won't be a fait accompli before that time.
Okay, do I have any other questions? Okay. Do you wish to close any of that? Yep. Okay, well I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. 12, councillor workshops. General Manager, would you like to advise on the workshops that have been held, please?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. On the 14th of June, we had two topics. The first was integrity and governance framework. So Manager Legal and Governance provided a presentation, led a discussion to update councillors on governance and integrity strategy and framework, and to receive feedback on the approach, timeframes, the start gaps analysis and discussions. The second one was around the local government review. So the Director Governance Strategy and Sustainable Development led a discussion on the Council's preferred direction for review of the local government, with a focus on the Southern Shore Community Catchment Information Pack. On the 21st of June, there's a Signet New Road project, and Director Infrastructure, Climate and Environment Services provided an update on the project to councillors. And the second part of that workshop was myself and the Mayor providing a debrief on the recent ALGA conference that we attended.
Thank you. I've just got a notice here that there's a Mercedes. The lights have been left on. It's rego number E53LF. Is that anyone in the... No? Okay. Councillor questions. 13.1, questions taken on notice. There was no questions taken on notice from May's meeting. 13.2, questions without. Are there any questions without notice tonight? Yes, Councillor Temby, and then we've got Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Camber-Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is in three parts, and my question is to the Mayor and the General Manager. The Huon Valley Residents and Ratepayers Association contacted councillors via email on the 18th of June, which referred to a response to the Huon HVRRA questions by David Spinks, dated 13 June. I officially lodged a request for a response via intranet on 19 June. Considering the considerable community interest and the need for councillors to be fully informed, 1, why was the HVRRA correspondence and 13 June response not provided to councillors at the time and lodged on the councillors' intranet? I'll continue with the questions. Mayor, as council's spokesperson, you provided councillors with answers to HVRRA questions on 20 June, but asked us not to respond to them ourselves. Why did council not officially respond until yesterday, the 27th of June? General Manager, throughout this process, I have highlighted the reputational risk to council of not clearly conveying the reasons for the rate increase and how we plan to serve the best interests of the community. The lack of a timely response to criticism of the council's 12% rate increase has attracted local and capital media coverage. This represents a reputational risk on council's own risk matrix. What level of risk was identified as part of this process? What was the mitigation and what lessons have been learned?
Okay. I'll go back to number 1. That was why didn't we reply and put it in the intranet? Is that correct? Look, in hindsight, probably should have been put on the intranet, but you must also understand that there is a lot of emails that are going backwards and forwards, and that was possibly my error in not making sure that went there. Number 2, on what was the next one?
The 20th of June,
Yep.
you provided councillors with...
Oh, that's correct. Yes, I understand that. That's because we were still making sure that the response back to the Huon Valley ratepayers was right. So sharing that information at that time was something that we didn't need you to do. We needed to make sure that the information we gave was correct and it hadn't been, but I wanted to keep you in the loop. So that's why that email came to you, or came to councillors. And number 3 was?
Directed to the General Manager. Throughout this process, I've highlighted the reputational risk.
Yep.
What level of risk was identified as part of this process? What mitigation and what lessons have been learned?
Okay, before we go to the General Manager, I can honestly say that the ABC, once they had our answers to that, came back and said to us they were sorry for wasting our time. So that I don't know what like you're saying that reputation. So anyway, I will now pass it over to the General Manager.
Yeah, look, I'd echo that comment. We had the media inquire and we're very happy with our responses that we provided back. In a sense of reputational risk, we considered obviously the risks sitting around the table with you, Councillor Temby, as to what it was putting it up and not putting it up. We reflected on the price indexes increasing at an accelerated rate. We talked about the deficits, we talked about the cash balances, we talked about the service that we can't continue to provide without adequate resources. So there's many elements of the risk that we've considered. In a sense, the reputation is compounded by the fact that we're not delivering good quality services. So I think we considered very well the risks as we made our way through the budget process. Over 6 workshops we discussed it. I was very impressed with the robust discussion we had through the workshop, and I know staff were very impressed, and many members of the public were very impressed about the robust conversation we had on the 7th of June.
I understand that. The question was about communication. And I think you may well remember that I actually raised that it wasn't just that we should be ready at the very beginning to have a timely, good communication coverage about the story, about what we're trying to achieve here, rather than just, we're slugging this 12%. It's more about what we're trying to achieve as a council, not only to have that initial story ready to go straight away, but also to respond to criticisms when they arise. And I think that is a lesson that we can learn, to be responding in a more timely way, to anticipate. We would have anticipated what the questions were. Good.
I'm not sure that's the case, actually, Councillor Temby.
Good communication is vital to restoring trust with the community.
Yep, that's fine.
This is not a criticism of the comms team, but of leadership. It is important that in future we respond to the community in a more timely and clear manner.
Thank you for your comment, and that's your interpretation of what went down. That is not necessarily the case. People have been replied to in accordingly and to the timeline. So I need to make that clear.
Through you, Mayor, I think what's been lost here is the Huon Valley Ratepayers Association also had a conversation with our director. So
we weren't told about it. We weren't informed.
I'm sharing with you that conversation was had. So we've been nothing but open as we've made our way through the process of responding.
Okay.
And I think that was in my letter today back to the association.
Yes.
Yes.
I had, yes, you can go then, Councillor Thorpe.
Sorry, I just wanted to, it was on, I want to second some of what Cathy said. I do think we were very slow in responding to the inquiries. There's a lot of misunderstanding in the community about the accounting policies of council, and the fact that we allowed that speculation to run for a week when we could have nipped that in the bud, I think was negligent.
I don't know whether that's actually correct, because some of that information was given and known, but not and didn't go back into the community. So I'm sorry about that, Jenny, that you think that happened, but that's not necessarily the case.
this was a case where the General Manager should have been on the front foot and answering the questions that came up, because we had just shocked the ratepayers with a 12% rate rise, and we did that as councillors on trust that we would be able to respond to the queries and explain all the reasoning behind that. And the fact that we didn't do that in a timely fashion, I am very concerned about.
Well, we responded within our charter requirements, and again, Jenny, it's about getting it right as it is about fast.
Sorry, the charter didn't count in this case. This was an exceptional case where we were talking about a 12% rate rise, and we should have answered when the information was with you. That should have gone straight out.
Jenny, can I just let you know that the Yuln Valley ratepayers did speak to David?
I'm aware of that.
Yes. So,
But that wasn't in the public domain, and it wasn't conveyed to councillors at the time either. So we were unable to reply to speculation either. And we were told not to reply.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thanks, Mayor. I actually have two questions. The first question is in regards to the local government review, and I know there's been very little time that we've all had to take in a lot of information, but I have a question on the local government review board's information. Has Council fact-checked the Huon Valley Council data represented in the Future of Local Government Review Southern Shore Community Catchment information, and is this data an accurate representation of our LGA?
The answer is no, it was not. Fact check, yeah.
Is that also an answer to it's not an accurate representation of our LGA?
Oh, can I
So
pass that?
through you, Mayor, if it's not fact checked, we haven't had the opportunity to see whether it is an accurate representation. We have identified a bit of a discrepancy we're trying to work through in relation to the comparison on average rates.
Thank you.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Yep.
My second question is in regards to Council's investment of funds policy. We have a great asset in our community with community-owned banks that are providing tens of millions of dollars worth of return to our community. So just wondering if there's any consideration to local investment options, for example, through the Huon Valley Financial Services, and if not, can this consideration be made for all future investment decisions to maximise impact in our community?
Yes, through to you, Director.
Yes, thank you. So I can advise that Council has a investment policy. Within that policy, it's risk-based. So what that means is we have limits of our portfolio that we can put with A1 rated institutions, A2, A3, etc. And then within those bands, there are institutional limits. So within A1, for example, there's a maximum that we can have with NAB or Westpac, what have you, and equally through the other bands. There is a provision in our investments policy whereby we can lift by 5% that maximum portfolio limit with any one institution where they provide community support. But at all times, of course, our policy provides for we place money with who provides the best rate. So in reference to Huon Valley Financial Services, we invite them to quote not every single time, but many times. And in recent times, it's been the case that they haven't provided us with the best rate, so we haven't been placing money with them. Just so happens that last week we had some money maturing, and Bendigo actually came to the party, and right across the time frames from 30 days right through to 365, they were either the best rate or equal best. So we did in fact place some money with them just last week, but generally speaking, in recent times, and when I say times, I'm talking probably several years now, they haven't been providing us the best rate, so we haven't placed money with them.
Okay, Councillor Jessup.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay. Thank you. Mayor, I was actually going to start by complimenting you with your media presentation after the meeting on the rate rise, and I thought we got out there very quickly, and we did get some national coverage, unfortunately. But look, I think we handled it well, and I think we weren't crucified by the media. And I do notice that some other mayors have been out dancing on the streets in front of the media lately, so that's been good. So I have two questions, Mayor. And one relates to Councillor Thorpe's question. So am I reading into the question of fact-checking that the authors of the comparison document made no attempt to contact this council to check the information they put in their document, which appears to many to actually be inaccurate? So can we just confirm that at no point did they get on the phone to us and say, is this correct or not?
Through to you, Director.
Through you, Mayor, at no point did they contact us.
Okay, so they own that problem. And secondly, Mayor, again, probably Lyle not being here, this will be a bit difficult, but I'm just wondering what the plan is on community engagement or getting community feedback to this council about the reforms in local government, and if have we had any community groups approach us to seek input with council, and how can groups apart from contacting individual councillors, of course, but how can groups feed into our thinking on this important matter?
Probably have to take that as far as what community feedback has been down in the acting director's area. I'll have to get him to let you know about that one, because I can't really answer that unless.
Through you, Mayor, there has been engagement on an informed basis only. And just for the explanation of the public, this is something that council has taken extremely seriously and is concerned in relation to the public's view regarding the local government reform options. There is a significant difficulty with the time frame that we have to undertake proper comprehensive engagement. So council has been encouraging our residents to participate in the local government board review community surveys. Certainly I'm not aware of any other approaches from groups or anything in relation to the process.
Yes, Councillor Armstrong.
Through you, Mayor. If I may, I just want to jump back to Pat's question. Can I provide an answer on my behalf to him?
Yes.
Right, so the question, I believe, Pat, was that you were wanting to know if our budget would have been any different, where are you, if we had known that there would have been a $6 million addition to the $12 million, yes? I seriously doubt that would have made any difference, because we knew all the time, David had told us that there would be allowances to be made that would differ, because we did know there was grant money coming in. We did know that that number was what I would call a fluid movable number, because it had to come in at some stage to then go out to other stages. And that amount really didn't have much reflection on what we had to budget for, because that number was there solidly in black and white. And we do have maintenance, and we do have assets, and we do have services that do need maintenance, which hasn't had the money to supply that service previous. So we did definitely know that amount was coming in, and that amount would differ. And I don't think that we could have changed that budget, given that we still had the same outgoings. We just happened to have more incomings, but that will be utilised for other things, like the $6 million coming in the grants and everything that wasn't. We didn't know about that until after we did the budget, but we knew that it would differ. Like David had always made it clear that there would be a differing amount. And we knew that some of that would be used for projects along the way. So in answer to your question, I wouldn't have changed my view on the budget, because it still had to be budgeted for what we were looking at in front of us. So if that sort of eases your needing to know how I feel, then that's my response to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
No problems. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start with the easy question. Please can officers give an update on timelines for the Huonville Pocket Park alongside the hub to be completed?
Yes, can I ask that through to the Director of Infrastructure, please?
Yep, thanks for the question. Next week we will be in completing the final drainage, backfilling with topsoil, ordering turf and installing the irrigation. Turf will get rolled out the week after next. It gets delivered on a Tuesday. It'll get installed on the Tuesday, all going well, weather, etc. That needs a 2-week bedding in period where it can't be trafficked on. So all things working out, we should have the fence down by the Monday the 24th with a park that's ready to go. There is a drinking fountain that is also to be installed that we can bring down the fences and get that one done separately because it's a minor bit of work. It's been ordered. We don't yet have a delivery date or an install time, but obviously we're pushing as we have been to get this job, which is more complex than it looks like from a funding perspective all the way through, to get done.
That's lovely, thank you. This is to you, Mayor, and to GM. We've now had 3 meetings in the last 8 months with STT regarding hooning and illegal dumping. However, whenever I've asked in the past when we will meet with STT regarding the forestry motion from December last year, I've been told it's been difficult to align diaries. This clearly isn't the case, so I ask again, when will we action this motion?
Okay, can I go through to the Director again?
Sure.
Thank you.
So there's ongoing conversation between myself and STT, and it is difficult to align diaries. It's getting the right people from STT and the right people from us. So we know our side of it. They're an organisation that's trying to make the right space and obviously educate us. This is not a core business feature for council. It's a highly complex situation. They are trying to help and educate us. We have an agenda agreed. They're finding the right people. We're trying to move it along as quickly as we can.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. Given the $50 million repair work to be undertaken on the Scots Peak Dam and the Edgar Dam on Lake Pedder, and the catastrophic consequences for Huonville were either of these dams to fail, I'd like to ask the Mayor and GM to call on Hydro Tasmania to hold a further public meeting in Huonville to brief residents on the repairs, the flood modelling and the evacuation plans in the very unlikely event of failure. The previous meeting, held late last year, was very poorly advertised by Hydro and attended primarily by members of the Save Lake Pedder Foundation. So I think it'd be great for Huonville residents to have another chance, or a proper chance, to actually ask questions and be better informed about this project.
I'm wondering whether that can go through to the next emergency.
Yeah,
Or-
look,
or
I
you
mean, I can sort of note
Okay.
that there was no formal offer for further engagement. However, we're happy to reach out and ask for a further briefing. I don't think Hydro would be unhappy with that. So they were looking to make sure that the community were aware when they did the last one. So.
Okay, thank you. I do have one further. I would just like to get the full cost of the attendance at the ALGA conference, and I'm just wondering, in the light of our climate change motion and the fallout and community angst following a 12% rate rise, and the fact that only 9 out of 29 Tassie councils attended that conference, whether we feel that particular visit was justified.
Yep, thank you. The costings will show up in my expenditure. Okay. And so it's part of, out of the budget that's set aside for myself, no different than any other councillor. There was 537 councils from Australia at that conference. So some of the ones that didn't go from Tasmania might not have had their mayor there, but some of them sent other people along. Okay, so they probably didn't get recorded as being there as a voting power, but they were there for the information that you receive from
Okay.
those. I can only speak for myself, and I find it highly valuable, and it's the networking with other councils and finding out what they're doing, how they're dealing with things. LGAT was there. Dion had a stall there as well. So I find it totally well worth going. If anybody else wants to go, they only have to inquire, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, look, I think we provided a community member a very comprehensive review of the value out of it. I think clearly the value from my perspective was sitting with our emergency service response team today, talking about the lessons that we're able to take from the near episode of the flood only a few weeks ago. And I was able to bring to the table that a Northern Territory council was using AI for this exact reason that they were calling out as an issue, which being, eyes to be able to see some of the discrepancies they were getting in data. So I'm back a week and a half and able to share that with police, SES, two other departments of the state government. So, look, I think value this year, value last year, I don't think there's any doubt that we as an organisation are getting value out of attending these forums, and I think the Governor-General best described that many of the problems that we're experiencing across the country, one or two councils have or are experiencing and have come up with solutions. Why are we all trying to come up with our own solutions to these problems rather than getting together, as we did for a week, and talking about some of these things? And there's some amazing innovation going on across our sector, I think totally underappreciated because we don't do a great job of boasting as a local government area. But the only way for us to get this is to, one, go along to these forums, two, create the networks that come out of these forums. And I now have several people that I can call up and I know would be very happy to share some of the things that are going on in their business, whether they be workforce planning, whether they be IT, whether they be a new framework around leading communities through change, which, as you'll appreciate, that's exactly what we're trying to do right now. So I have absolutely no doubt we're getting good value out of those conferences.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add to that, we will be having a Zoom meeting with the Coordinator General, Brendan Moon, the National Emergency Management and he will be Zooming in with us to have a talk about our emergency management plans and what else we feel we need in our valley. So, that came from that as well. So, have any other questions? All right. Now 13.3, Councillors notice a motion. I've just been advised that because Councillor Gibson's not here, it will lapse. It can't be moved by somebody other than the person that put the motion forward. Okay? So that can go up. Yep. Well, someone else can move the motion for next meeting if that's the case. Yep. That's correct, isn't it? Yes. Sorry. 13.011/23, the motion. Councillor Jessup, are you happy to move the motion as included in the reports?
I am, Mayor.
Okay. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Temby. Councillor Jessup, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll take the motion as read in the agenda paper. Councillors, for most of my working life I've been involved in advocating for, protecting or monitoring or sometimes removing people's human rights. But despite being one of the richest countries in the world, we still have to pay people to protect the rights of others. From the mid-1980s, I worked in Western Australia, places where geographic features are still called things like, or were at that time still called things like Black Man's Leap. A place where the Broome Prison is 99% Aboriginal, and my role at one stage as manager young offender programs saw me delivering services in detention centres where mostly Aboriginal kids were detained. We come from a country where we had a Royal Commission into deaths in custody, yet while we've been deciding how to deal with that, we've still had another 500 people, Aboriginal people, die in custody. I travelled through the northwest of Western Australia where I conducted a study looking at how LORE law and LAW law interact. I met many people living on the margins of society and even on the margins of people who live in the long grass in the Aboriginal communities. I talked to a group of youths who see how we look at them, how we shuffle away from them, or how we move our handbags as we walk past them. Well, I don't move my handbag, but they certainly got the message loud and clear from people. One of the saddest interviews I conducted was on the beach at Broome, which was probably one of the most idyllic settings to be on, but to have an elder try to comprehend why 20 young kinsmen had taken their own lives in the last couple of years. I went to towns where there was still active segregation. And now people say that talking about these things just pick at the scabs of our society and we should just ignore them and let it be, but I can tell you for many Aboriginal people there are no scabs, they're still open, bleeding, seething wounds in fact. And then of course there's the genocide myth in Tasmania. Weren't we all told that Tasmanian Aboriginals died out in the 1880s? I'm not sure where the 30,000 Aboriginal people on the census came from in Tasmania, but they've moved back obviously. I worked here in youth justice and child safety where I worked with many young Aboriginal people. And the stories of Aboriginal urban communities are different to the outback groups, I acknowledge that, but there's still many of the same themes of hopelessness, shame and disconnect. And of course I lived at the time in Western Australia, I lived through the rhetoric that Mabo would steal our land for us. I remember being told that saying sorry to Aboriginal people would cost us billions of dollars in compensation. And now I'm hearing that the Yes campaign will divide the nation. Of course, we're not divided at the moment. The Health and Wellbeing Committee that I chair has raised the issue of our position on the Voice and on the Statement from the Heart and the upcoming referendum question. As Council does not have a position, staff cannot actively be involved in the community discussion, or that's their reading of their position. So this motion is not about how we will vote as individuals. What you do in your own ballot box is up to you, but it's about how we present leadership and a willingness to show a discussion of this topic. Now, to be honest, I hope that you will do vote yes, but that's up to you. Staff feel that they need to respond to questions and they need to respond to our Aboriginal communities, of which we've gone out and talked to, and all of them want to hear, at the minimum, Council being involved in supporting and fostering this discussion. So they're quite clear about that. And this motion really does two things. It does recognise that there is a big issue going on, and we recognise the statement and we recognise where the country has got to, and that's been a legitimate process of significant dialogue. And it also states that this council believes it's important that as a welcoming and diverse community that we support the open, honest and respectful debate on social issues that impact First Nations people. And the only really action that it does, pardon me, is it allows our council staff to attend some of these education sessions, and people like Reconciliation Tasmania are running neutral sessions, and it allows them, or gives them permission that they can go out and undertake relevant workshops or community advice, or even just having community information in the information centre. So, because what we actually do want is people of the Huon Valley to make an informed and considered decision when it comes to the referendum, whenever that comes, and that they take into account the what our own local communities are saying, that they would seek their support in that. But council staff will give a neutral support to just a respectful and rational debate on the issue. So I commend the motion to you councillors and ask for your support. Thank you.
Okay, do I have anyone else to speak for this? No? Yes, Councillor Armstrong?
Sorry, through you, Mayor. I just want to confirm with Councillor Jessup why the staff need our permission.
Because
it's for the benefit of everybody.
Yeah, no, because they told me, but the Director, Legal Governance might help me out here. They were quite certain that if they were attending things like the reconciliation workshops or holding any workshops, that they would need the council to have a position on that. And Lyle at the time did agree with that.
Yeah, over to you, Director.
Through you, Mayor, they wouldn't be able to express an opinion or view on behalf of council. It would certainly be a little bit difficult for them to participate in any discussions or workshops, but to the extent that they have to is a little bit unclear. So I suppose this motion as put forward provides some clarity in that regard.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have any other? You don't need to close, Councillor. I think, yeah, Councillor Jessup.
No, I just commend the motion to you, and really it is about giving staff our permission and our blessing to engage in having the community talk about this issue in the Huon Valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll ask that I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor Jessup. Okay, agenda item 15.021/23, Local Government Association General Meeting Motions. I refer councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Canberra-Smith, and a seconder, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Canberra-Smith, do you wish to speak to this motion?
Yes, please, Mayor. Thank you. I guess I'd like to start with just a question. When can councils put up motions for LGAT? I mean, I can't speak for other councillors, but I wasn't aware that there was an LGAT general meeting on the 30th of June. So I wonder if in future we might be advised when there are meetings coming up, and if that's something that, you know, can we just put in motions up willy-nilly to LGAT? I mean, how does it work?
Thank you. I'll pass that through to the
Through you,
Director.
Mayor, we can put them up at any time.
Okay.
It'll just be put off to the next available LGAT meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I have, I suppose when we went to Alga, Paul put, Councillor Gibson put his motion forward, so,
Yeah, we were requested at that point to put them forward, so I wasn't sure what the process for LGAT was.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I just had a couple of comments on this. The first motion about the leave of absence, there's a question in our commentary here about, you know, why becoming a parent would make any difference, and to me that would seem to bring us in line with normal Tasmanian legislation for parental leave. So I can understand why they were suggesting that. So I'm not sure why we've ignored that in our commentary. And also I would support support the second motion with respect to outlawing the creation of restrictive covenants which prevent land from being used for public, social or affordable housing, etc. I mean, I was gobsmacked to find out that's actually happening, and I think we should condemn it and support the Clarence motion. And I also support the third one as well on an expert reference group from councils to consider the effect of short stay accommodation and whether there are levers that council can use to minimise their effects on housing supply.
Thank you. Yes.
Through you, Mayor, just on clarifying advice from Councillor Campbell-Smith that she's moving the recommendation. However, the abstain would be support in the second.
On anyone else like to speak on these motions? Yes, Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, through you, Mayor. Just through you, Mayor. If we're going to change that from abstain to support, could we have a bit of information on why we would have recommended to abstain?
Through you, Mayor, I refer to the comments in the report, understanding that the Clarence Council is putting the motion forward, wants to achieve an outcome by ensuring that there's no restrictions on social or affordable housing in subdivisions. There's certainly no advice that I can give you to be supporting that or not supporting that. There are two sides to the story that you'd need to consider. So the recommendation is abstain. It's a matter for councillors as to whether you wish to state a position as to support or not to support.
Okay, so if that's the case, then do we vote on each one here to get? Yeah.
Be appropriate to split them.
Yes.
Point of order, Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment that we change abstain to support that motion. So could we deal with it that way and then we just make that decision?
Through you, Mayor, it's been moved as support. Councillor Campbell-Smith has moved it as support.
Oh,
Yeah.
you've just amended.
Or she,
I thought
yeah.
you just making a general statement. But no, I now
I didn't,
note the
I didn't
procedural
state
motion.
it was an
Thank you,
amendment,
Jen.
sorry.
Well spotted there.
Okay, so we'll go through. Is there any other questions? No? Okay. So,
sorry, just on that one. Infill housing in many other places in Australia requires a mix of social and affordable and commercial housing. Yeah, Tasmania still loves to build social housing in ghettos as far away from public transport, employment, shops, amenities and so forth. And these covenants simply just reinforce that. But I certainly know many local government areas across Australia where the blend and mix of housing from small apartments for old people through to large mansions for rich people can all coexist. So I certainly would support the support of that. Thank you.
okay, so we might go back to the first one that we have there, which is the council leave of absent provisions, and our is to support. Yep. So all those in favour of support of the...
It's support and amendment, which would simplify it.
Okay, so support, and that's on the leave of absence one, isn't it? Isn't that the first one? Yep. All right. Okay. So all those in favour of council leave of absent provisions in the recommendation and support the amendment, was that right? Yep. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and that one is passed. The second one is the restrictive covenants on use of land and property, and at the moment there has been an amendment to change that from abstain to support. So all those in favour of the amendment as well, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. And the third one is the short stay review of planning controls for short stay accommodation. So all those in favour of that motion, please raise your hand. That's Councillor, it's all councillors now, he changed his mind. And pardon? Oh, yes. And also, we need to vote that the Mayor has the discretion to vote on amendments to motions subject to general consistency with the policy position and subject to relevant matters of debate. So all those in favour of me voting at the meeting, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Agenda number 15.022/23, Councillors' Allowance Expenses, Conferences and Training Policy Review. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move a motion? Councillor Thorpe. Do I have a seconder?
Just to clarify, Mayor, I'm moving an amendment to the recommendation.
Okay, yep.
And that is that Part B be changed to having been reviewed, the Councillor Allowances, Expenses, Conferences and Training Policy 006 be amended in accordance with Attachment B to this report and amended to include the following clause. 3.4.2, councillors may use a council vehicle if available, and in response to climate emergency motion 3.001/23 are strongly encouraged to utilise council's electric pool vehicle as a first option.
Okay. Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder to the motion including the amendment? Councillor Armstrong. Do you wish to speak to the motion and the amendment, the amended motion?
Yeah, just briefly, I think we all know that we have access if we need to use a council pool vehicle when travelling for conferences or meetings that are outside the Huon Valley and long distances, and I think it's important to note that we do have an electric vehicle available in that pool. I, for one, have used that. You have to go through a great 15-minute training session. Sandy can help you set it up. The staff are very passionate about making sure we treat it right and also now know how to use it very well. I had good fun. So I just wanted to ensure that we're aware of that, but also in response to the climate emergency motion that we all voted for, that we are also strongly encouraging ourselves and each other to utilise that vehicle when travelling long distances.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions or statements on that one? No? Okay, well, I'll put the amended motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Is your arm getting tired, is it, Councillor Jesser? Okay. Agenda number 15.023/23, Risk Management Policy and Framework. I refer councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Temby, and a seconder? Councillor Camber-Smith? Councillor Temby, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, thank you. I think this is an excellent initiative. I think it's very important to identify risk. And I just have some questions as to make sure that there are certain elements within this risk policy that have been covered. So should I talk about to them now?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Should the impacts on mental health of staff and community be identified as a risk within the framework in situations, for example, an emergency situation like we saw during the 2019 bushfires? Staff were relied upon to step in and deal with a highly stressful environment. Have we included this risk and mitigation measures? Similarly, inadequate workforce planning can lead to workload stresses. For example, directors' workload impacting on their home life. Stresses on medical services staff due to a lack of capacity to fill appointments due to lack of doctors. Medical services consuming large amounts of directors' time, which can impact on time available to manage other important core functions, for example, overall community health and wellbeing and communications.
Is that? Okay, thank you. Can I pass that through to you, General Manager? Oh, to you. No, thank you. Sorry.
Through you, Mayor. Specific work health and safety risks aren't specifically going to be captured within this the risk register. Certainly, things that can be associated with mental health of the community is something that can be looked at and added to it. So the risk register as presented is very much a first start. It is the first risk register that this council has had and will certainly be populated on an ongoing basis.
Thank you.
Okay, do I have any other questions or statements on that? Yes, Councillor Armstrong.
Sorry, through you, Mayor. Whilst I understand it's really important to have a risk register, and I know that we haven't had one before in the Huon Valley Council, I think we just need to be a bit wary, not underestimating the power of needing to be on it, but I think we have to word what we're going to put on there very carefully, or it could just about cover everything that we do on a day-to-day life, you know, and how people perform their duties, which are usually overworked and overstressed. But I think the wording needs to be clear and careful when we start talking about day-to-day situations on risk registers.
I believe that it'll come back and we'll be talking about this as they arise. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor, the risk register is the high-level strategic and operational risk. There will be underneath this lower-level sort of risk registers when you're talking about departmental level, working level, and whatever. This is the start of the process, so won't necessarily be getting to those day-to-day. Those day-to-day activities might roll up and say that has a greater effect on this side of the strategic thing in council.
Okay, any other? Councillor Temby, do you have any closing?
Yes, thank you. So just the emerging risk register, the strategic risk register is included. The audit panel that met recently queried two main risks, being childcare and medical, as these are risks that council does not have to carry, as it is not a requirement to provide those services. And also, there are 14 key risks that were identified in this process, and medical services, failure to provide medical services was deemed to be unsatisfactory in control effectiveness. So I think that it is something that we need to be looking at and looking at our mitigation.
Thank you. Do we have any? So that was the closing. Yep. Thank you. All right. Well, I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all, councillors, and the motion is carried. Agenda number 15.024/23, development of a fee waiver reduction and refund policy review. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor? Yes, Councillor Campbell-Smith. Yes. Oh, you're just moving it? Yeah, sorry. I thought you was going to tell me something. You looked at me.
Jumping the gun, sorry.
God, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor O'Neill.
Through you, Mayor, I understand that that's a different motion to the recommendation, so you might have that read before you have the seconder.
Yes, apologies. I want to move an amendment if I may.
Yes, that's what I was sort of waiting for. Thank you. So I'll allow you. Yeah, you now can speak to your amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. Basically, I just want to add another clause into the list of things for which we may consider would consider a development fee waiver. So it's to insert the following clause, 3.7, tiny homes. A 50% discount on planning and building permit fees will be applied to applications made for a tiny home. If the total fees payable without reduction represent more than 20% of the total costs of the project or activity, the 50% reduction is to be increased to 75%. To be eligible, under this clause, the applicant must demonstrate the property will be an applicant's only permanent residence. The property does not exceed 37 metres square floor area, excluding roof overhangs, decks, stairs and access ramps. Is single storey, excluding sleeping loft or mezzanine. And my reasoning for this is that we have just put in a large increase on our planning fees. We are in a housing affordability crisis, so a lot of people are building or wishing to build small footprint homes. We've just put in a 50%, and this is the reason this has come to council, I believe, to include the 50% discount on first home buyers grants, to give them a 15% discount on their planning fees, and I'd like to extend that sort of refund possibility to people who are struggling to afford to build a home, and thus are only going to be able to afford to build a very tiny home. As you know, I did try to introduce a scale of fees based on floor plan, but you know, if we could at least make it cheaper and simpler for people who can only afford that size of home, I think it's something we could do to make things easier for people.
Okay, do I have a seconder for the amended motion? Councillor Temby. Do you wish to speak further on your amended?
No, I think everybody knows the situation that we've got in the Huon. We do have a lot of people sleeping in cars, sometimes with children, sometimes reluctant to seek help for fear that those children will be taken away from them. We have people in, mouldy caravans, and couch surfing, etc. And the pressure's not reducing on people. So if we can, this is one small thing we can do to just help a little bit in that space.
Yes, Councillor Jessup.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I actually support the concept, but I'm just wondering, your definition of a tiny home, effectively, Jenny, is 3.7.3, so it's something of less than 37 square metres. By putting tiny home in it, does tiny home trigger another level of meaning? And this is probably more a planning question to the director. But yeah, does a tiny home, for example, have to be on wheels or mobile or something? So I just want to make sure we're not adding another meaning. But I'd be, as an alternative, you could just say that for the purpose of this definition, yeah, a tiny home is, and then 3.7.3.1.2.3.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass that on to the Director.
Through you, Mayor, it doesn't matter whether it's on wheels or a fixed dwelling. At the moment, we do have some bylaw restrictions on wheels, which we're reviewing at the present time. Those that are structures just are considered as a dwelling, so it's a residential use under the planning scheme.
Can I just note, I just did a quick Google, and I'm sure everyone else might have tried the same thing, but there is a tiny house definition, which this is different to. So again, I wouldn't like to see people getting confused, but it actually provides for a larger floor area than the 37 square metres. It's I think up to 50. So, and I'm just quoting off the tiny house definition, which is through the Australian Tiny House Association. So I'm not sure whether to keep things consistent. We want to revert to a standard definition already, or you've come up with a reason for it. Councillor Campbell-Smith.
I was working on just some of the tiny homes that I found. I was just working on some of the tiny homes that I found online that tend to be based on the footprint of sort of a container, shipping container type size. But I'm happy to be persuaded otherwise. It's the concept more than anything that I'm keen to. Yeah. Did you have?
I think it would be important to be able to make sure that we make it easy for making that decision on whether it's going to be the 37 or what the definition is. I think otherwise it's going to become a little confusing. Is that where you were coming from, General Manager?
Well, more just to standardise it.
Yeah, if there's a standard definition, then let's go with that. Let's make that reference. That's fine. Yeah.
Mayor, just to further that, some of the I've googled it as well.
Yeah.
A tiny home is a movable dwelling, so quite a few reference to it being on wheels and stuff. Now, I'm not sure if there's been any case law in Tasmania that's defined it in any way, but I'm almost thinking if you get rid of that term tiny home and just say small homes that do not exceed 37 square metres and floor plates, are exempt on this basis, and then you just take that second layer of confusion out of it altogether.
Yeah, if there's a possibility of confusion, then let's just change it to small homes with a footprint of not exceeding X. Yeah.
That's my suggestion.
Okay, so the wording would take out tiny and put in small?
Or just homes, I suppose, or residences, and then change wherever it says tiny home, just replace it with residence, and everything else follows from that, unless we wanted to change the 37 metre squared floor area to, and I'll take. Okay, well, small home then. Okay, small home, fine. Yep.
And 3.7.3 actually defines it quite well.
Yeah.
It's just you've added tiny, which has got a whole lexicon of other.
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor. Yeah, Councillor Temby.
Thank you. I had the question of definition as well, but if we look at it, first of all, the question is, have you clarified with the Director of Finance about the financial ramifications, whether it would make much difference or anything along those lines? And also, should we be looking at encouraging these really tiny homes artificially by providing this incentive? Or should we go to the definition of tiny homes being the one that is that slightly larger one? I mean, it's almost like planning ad hoc. I don't know whether we've investigated this thoroughly enough. I'm just having a conversation here. The other question I have is the 3.7.2, where you've pointed out that if the total fees payable without reduction represents more than 20% of the total costs of the project or activity, the 50% reduction is to be reduced to 75%. Is that based on any discussions you've had with the Director of Finance, or is that just...
It's based on the, within the actual policy, it talks about reductions available for is it community groups making, building. So it was based on that particular reference, such that, if the planning fees are a relatively large percentage of the building construction cost, then the planning fees to be, commensurately reduced. And
I understand, and I do agree with the thought behind the motion. I just wanted to make sure that we've carefully considered everything, and whether or not, are we going to end up subsidising and encouraging artificially a larger number of small, and is that really what we want for the Huon Valley, is a large number of small houses?
This doesn't seek to encourage, it just seeks to make it easier for people who have limited funds. I can't imagine that people, as a rule, would choose to live on a very small footprint if they could afford to build a larger house. And I think, especially if someone's, wanting to bring up kids, there's no way somebody's going to want to do that in a tiny home, or even, a couple. But if you're a 55-year-old woman, which is the largest growing person that's now becoming homeless or in homeless insecurity, this might be all they could afford. And the planning fees could be quite a hurdle.
Yes, Councillor Burgess.
I agree with the 50%, but I think actually giving somebody a 75% is just taking a step far too far. I really believe that it will encourage people to go down the small way. And if somebody's eligible for the first homeowners grant, they're going to get 50% anyway, aren't they? That's if there is their first owner. But now you've brought up the scenario with a middle-aged woman that's got nowhere to live. But I don't mind the 50% concept at all, but I really don't agree with the 372 at all. I think it's getting to the stage where, we'll knock up a container and cut a hole in it, They'll be everywhere.
I'd like to sort of think on from that. If we approve and give discount for a tiny home and someone sells it and then puts in a development application to build on to the tiny home, the status, I suppose,
that
is the
wouldn't be
discount.
That wouldn't be eligible.
Yeah. I'm just wondering how many people might do this, and I'm wondering about the fact that people can only afford to build a tiny home. Purchasing land isn't cheap either.
Ancillary dwellings are allowed. So, for instance, if somebody wanted to build a tiny home on their parents' property, and that's the sort of thing that could often come up, or else they might have inherited some land. There's lots of circumstances where, people, all they can afford to do is put up a small house. And as I say, ancillary dwelling comes under the under a single residence in the planning scheme. So if they have a friend, a relative, or a parent who allows them to build a tiny home as an ancillary home, and as I say, I really can't imagine that anybody's going to choose to live in a container with a hole cut in it if they could possibly afford to live in something better than that.
I also sort of wonder whether we need to do a little bit more work on this one. Jenny, to back to Councillor Temby's point where we need to probably ask a few more questions and go and get the actual wording on this correct as far as the tiny home bit goes. But yes, Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah, I just have a comment along the same train, Mayor. I'm generally supportive of this motion, but we were just handed this amendment, and there's a few concerns I have. We've spoken around the eligibility being to support people that might not be able to afford anything. There's no mention here, but also, if someone's building a tiny home is also eligible for a 50% reduction under first home buyer. Does that mean they're having a 100% reduction? I'm not sure. So I'd actually be more in favour if we were to take this conversation further to talk about more in detail what all those things mean.
We can always bring it, back as after we've had a little bit more discussion about the correct wording on this, and a little bit more research maybe. But regardless of that, we had. Oh, yes, sorry. Yes.
I'm just echoing what you're saying. I think it is a little bit policy on the run, because certainly, Jenny, what I'm reading here is that 50 square metres seems to be quite an acceptable definition for a tiny home, because I don't know if you've measured 37 square metres, but
no, it's pretty full.
It would be a bit tight.
Yeah.
But it does. There are certainly quite a number. There's a New South Wales government site which talks about it and stuff. So I wonder if, with the movers' satisfaction, if she'd be happy to put her amendment back to staff for comment to the next meeting, and then we just bring back an additional amendment to this paper. I don't know if that's possible. So we get through the first home buyer one now, and then we just bring the paper back with the tiny home amendment and some definition around, are you allowed more than one refund?
I mean, I'm happy to do that. I would make the comment that we very rapidly agreed the 50% discount for first home. I think that took us about 30 seconds to make that decision, and yet this is policy on the run.
Yeah.
So we did.
It's a hard decision to make when you put up 144.
No, exactly. Well, this is the same problem, so same issue. So, but if the feeling of the room is that we should investigate the wording more and come back with a recommendation, ask officers to come back with a recommendation on the definition and consequences, then I'm happy to do that, rather than risk it being lost. Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Tammy.
Thank you. Look, I think this is a really important motion, and I really appreciate you raising it, Councillor Campbell-Smith, and I would like to see it go back to the next council meeting if possible. Is that possible?
Could we defer it till August? I'm not here.
Well, what we could do is just bring it to a workshop and sort of have a discussion around some of these wrinkles that we're talking about, and then bring it back to the next.
Somebody else could move it for you.
Yeah,
like it could be.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Wait a minute. August would be better as for a matter of timing.
Okay, great. Sounds good to me.
All right. So we resort back to the recommendation that's there before us. So do I have someone to move the recommendation of this report, please? Yep. Councillor O'Neill. Thank you, Councillor Jessup, for your wisdom. And do I have a seconder for... yes, Councillor Jessup. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor O'Neill?
Yes, well, I think it's pretty important that we were all worried about the cost of people getting into the market, and I think this is a small step in helping those people. Obviously, we need to do more, but it's a step in the right direction.
Yep.
And first home is a big step to take now, and a massive responsibility to take on.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do I have any other councillor to speak to the recommendation? No? You don't need to close, Councillor O'Neill? Okay. All those in favour? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Agenda item 15.025/23, draft Tasmanian planning policies. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Jessup, and a seconder. Councillor Temby. Councillor Jessup, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, I'm fairly passionate about some of the quagmire that the state government has given us in strategic land use. The importance of the Tasmanian planning policies is that they should be the things that we have first, and from there the LUDs and the LPSs and all these things flow. So thank you. Which minister is it? Minister Yent? No, Minister the other one, Ferguson, for getting this the right way around. I think there are some significant problems with this document that the actual LPS hearings are actually bringing forward. And I think the commissioners even, who will have to implement these policies in the end, recognise that the Huon Valley is actually quite unique. So we have small blocks, we have lots of hills, we have all sorts of nuances. One of the greatest points of contention for us is the whole concept of what's scenic and what's a landscape value. And I note in these policies, it's just very vague. It says something that's significant and leaves it at that, and then uses some example like geographical or geological landforms and stuff. So I think for us, for Derwent Valley, for a number of the councils down this end of the state, they do fail to address our needs. They're quite vague in terms of their small township type discussions, and again we've got a number of small regional areas, we've got hamlets or whatever you want to call them that we're going through with our own work. So we certainly, I think our council staff are actually quite informed about this now because they have actually been doing the consultations that they've been doing. So I'd certainly encourage that we really do look at making a strong submission to this. So I encourage staff, or I think we should be giving permission to staff to do some hard work on this and push our agenda, whatever that is.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Temby.
Thank you. As you know, Director, through you, Mayor, I have provided you with a submission. I do have some additional comments. For example, 2.1 biodiversity, 2.1.3 strategy, identify biodiversity values appropriately, rank the significance of those values and map their location, as well as 3.5, contaminated air, identify and map the land that has been used or is being used or has been affected by use and development involving potentially contaminating activities. Who would fund these strategies, state or local government? Will I continue with the other two questions?
Wait a moment, we might just answer that so we don't have to go back over to you, Director.
Through you, Mayor, it will ultimately be sent down to councils to determine them in their own municipal area.
2.2, waterways, wetlands and estuary strategies. Number 3, encourage the protection of waterways by retaining, creating or improving vegetation riparian zones to maintain their natural drainage function and minimise draft Tasmanian planning policies. Can you give an example of how this strategy would be implemented?
Please refer to the strategy again.
Page 20. Oh, so
page
it's
22.
2.2, waterways, wetlands, estuaries. Encourage protection of waterways, which is number 3. And it's on page 23, unnatural or accelerated erosion of stream banks while providing riparian habitat corridors and protecting landscape values. Can you give an example of how this strategy would be implemented?
No.
Section 12B of the Act sets out the broad range of matters that a TPP may relate to, including the sustainable use, development, protection or conservation of land and environmental protection. 4.0, sustainable economic development. Policy context. The planning system can also facilitate infrastructure development in areas best aligned with environmental, social and economic values, provide for strategic co-location of new infrastructure with existing infrastructure and promote circular economies. Yet, 4.3, extractive industries, 4.3.3, strategies number 1, identify and protect strategic resource areas and deposits, including areas of known mineral resources and strategically important construction materials such as sand. Considering, for example, the potential to mix crushed glass into aggregate exists for many applications, including roadway and parking lot base or levelling concourses, etc. And 4.8, innovation research, 0.5, states support opportunities for greater economic self-sufficiency, diversification and circular economies to help reduce the impacts of external forces on the state economy. The question is, should we change 4.3.3, number 1, identify and protect strategic resources and deposits, including areas of known mineral resources, in brackets, which cannot be sourced via the circular economy, and strategically important construction materials such as sand. So what I'm saying is that if we don't start to actually have consistency throughout this TPP about things like, for example, the circular economy, then it will not be implemented. So I'm suggesting a change. Would you like me to repeat the change?
Yes, please, because I'll have to add that to the submission.
Thank you.
Please go slowly.
Okay. So it's 4.8, innovation and research, 0.5. We're at number 1. Oh, sorry, it's 4.3.3, number 1. Identify and protect strategic resource areas and deposits. Have you got that?
I have that.
Yeah. Including areas of known mineral resources, in brackets, which cannot be sourced via the circular economy. So I'm suggesting that people should first go to the circular economy, and if you can't find that, then and strategically important construction materials such as sand. So just leave that as it is. So it's just an insert of that one phrase within the document.
So through you, Mayor, this will be reflected in an amendment to the submission because it's not our document, obviously. So we'll just be identifying that.
Okay. Was that?
That's it.
That's it.
Thank you.
So is that now just a change in the recommendation, or is it an amendment?
Through you, Mayor, it's best shown as a within the motion itself, so that it'd be a submission be made in relation to the draft Tasmanian planning policies as set out in attachment B to this report, as amended to include comment on 4.3.3-1, to include the words which cannot be sourced from the circular economy, in brackets, after known mineral resources. And we'll just put some wording just around that.
Happy with that?
I'd be happy to accept that amendment, Mayor.
Right.
Okay, do I have any other?
Just to say thank you, Matt, for Director, sorry, for pulling our various submissions together and representing them. It's, I think it's, and also to second what Councillor Jessup was saying about this all being the wrong way round or back to front, but all we can do at this stage is to try and make these policies as good as they ought to be.
Okay. So, if there's no other, I'll put the motion.
Close?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, oh, you want to close?
Yeah,
Right, okay.
just quickly.
Yep, go for it.
Look, I probably would have rather we talk about this first in a workshop and nut it out a bit more, but I know timing was tight for that, so I acknowledge that, because I think we have got quite an advanced level of thinking around this table now, because we have been through this whole process for the last 18 months. But yeah, that be that what it may, I think we've captured a number of the concerns. When is it due, Mayor?
Through you, Mayor, we've submitted a draft.
It is actually due yesterday, wasn't it?
I'll be submitting an amended draft tomorrow.
Yeah. So the timeline was quite tight, but that is what it is, and I think as you've said, Councillor, we all had a bit of a chance to throw some 2 cents worth in. So thanks for putting it together, and I'm assuming we're going to do a 35G report as well, Mayor, which is after our LPS process, is another opportunity to raise things in the process that were not, didn't quite work for us, I suppose, is the simple way of putting it. So we'll have another chance to add our 2 cents worth to the planning debacle that Minister Ferguson has created. Thank you, Mayor.
That was a nod, yes. Thank you.
I got the nod, it's on tape.
Okay. All right. So, all those in favour of the recommendation with the added to attachment B, please raise your hand. That's all councillors bar Councillor Armstrong. So that's, yep, abstaining.
Yeah, totally lost me. I now can't vote on something that I didn't understand.
Yep. Agenda number 15.026/23, Yuan Valley Food Hub Business and Strategic Plan. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Temby, and a seconder, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Temby, do you wish to speak to this?
Thank you very much. I just want to congratulate everyone involved in the project, and it's been a wonderful way of reaching out to the community, and I think that there's a lot of good work that's can come out of it.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions on this one, or any other statements? No? Do you wish to close, Councillor Temby?
Thank you. Yes, I started off on the as a community representative on the reference group, and so I've seen it all the way through, and I can see that there are many flow-on effects, and I look forward to seeing it flowing on into the future.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there's no other things. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Agenda item number 15.027/23, Yuan Valley Food Resilience Strategy. I'll refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move a motion? Move the motion. Councillor Armstrong, and a seconder, Councillor Temby. Councillor Armstrong, do you wish to speak to this?
Through you, Mayor, not really, but I am going to. I just think these resilience strategies and the food hubs and all these little things that are going on, they're actually really important and they work really well in our community, and I don't think they get enough coverage, and I don't think people really understand how they actually work along the way. So I just like to direct people to more information on the website if there is any that they can find, because I think it's a good thing. Thank you.
Yes, there is. There's some information that they can gain from there. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Do anyone else wish to? Yes, Councillor Temby.
Thank you. I'm particularly interested in the policy aspect because I think, you know, like there's some really good work all the way through, but this is something that can broaden out into the other levels of government and our own. There's an opportunity for the Huon Valley Council to consider and develop agricultural and fishing policies to support Huon Valley Council to better work with industry and community to grow prosperity in the Huon Valley. And I'm quoting from the strategy. Other areas, the food resilience strategy stakeholder engagement also identified the following issues which warrant further exploration: biosecurity planning and resilience, food safety regulations and compliance, and road and transport infrastructure.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments on this one? Yes, Councillor Jessup.
Thank you, Mayor. Sort of a little bit along the line of what Councillor Temby was saying. I'd really like to see a clear statement for Council to be able to monitor our progress on some of this, because I noticed that the hexagonal graphic at the start where it had the land use and it had food laws and stuff. So now with this strategy in place, I think what I'd like to see the next document that comes out of economic development is some clear statements about, well, what are the inhibitors that we're creating? So, for example, land use policy and all those things, small rural lots being chastised for people growing things on them. Problems about food safety of people having farm gate stores at their front gate, and is that legal or not legal? So that's where I'd like to see where we as a policy group, if you like, can get some feedback. And I fully acknowledge that it's not something that somebody can do off the side of their desk quickly, but I'd probably like to see maybe in the next 3 or 4 months at one of our many workshops even, maybe that we have an hour set aside to say, well, what are some real changes we can make, and lobby also through things like LGAT to make statewide changes to actually make food resilience much easier for people, because the people I talk to just are battered down by one rule after the other that they get hit by, and some of the rules make sense and some of the rules, the appliers of the rules admit that they don't make sense for what they're trying to do. So I don't know how we can get that, Mayor, but that would be good to get that sort of feedback.
Yep, no problems at all. Yes, Councillor Camber-Smith.
Hi, I can't remember. I think it might be the LUD's work, but certainly one of the things that we've budgeted for coming through in the next financial year is a means to tie all these strategies together, and I think that's really key to make sure that we do have a sort of big picture that's straddles all these strategies and make sure they are actually working in parallel with one another or reinforcing one another and not mutually exclusive, which some of them might be. So I'm hopeful that piece of work that we have scheduled and budgeted for will encompass this sort of thing as well. I mean, because there are a number of actions in here, and it'd be nice to see them actually panning out over the longer term. So that's really all I was hoping that, yeah.
Thank you. No problems. Do we have any other? Yes, Councillor O'Neill.
Oh, yeah, just like to add that this is a great lifestyle thing, but something we should be aware of, and it's been a lot of resources put into local schools as well, in community gardens.
Yeah.
And if we could work hand in hand with those, I think it's be a far more productive process if we get people at a young age that are already doing this sort of thing.
Yep.
And it's probably a different funding and a different process, but we should be sort of combining those resources.
Definitely. And when you're talking about the schools and the gardens, it's not about just planting a garden and walking away. It's teaching them how to plant for seasonal, for when they're not at the school over the summer. So there is lots of things within that, and I'm sure we will get told about those as they progress. Yes, Councillor.
I was just going to say, in terms of the schools, I mean, this next 6 months, the food hub is actually going to be doing that, isn't it? It's going to be establishing.
That's correct.
School farms, and I just wanted to say I do hope that includes the state schools as much as
it is at the moment a state school. The gardens are.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, terrific. Because
Yeah.
it's always a worry that sometimes the public schools we have more stress-free teachers and more engaged parents, and it's nice to see the state schools getting, their share of these initiatives.
Yeah, the other with the Catholic school is the Sacred Country, not the Gardens project.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yes. Have we got any other questions? No.
I'm going to be a bit cheeky here, Mayor, and I'm not sure if I'm going to move this as an amendment or just ask that it be done. That a lot that's in this food resilience strategy is very relevant to what the Planning Commission is currently considering at the moment, and I would really appreciate if the council could send the chair of the Planning Commission, John Ramsey, a copy of that with our compliments, because many of the issues that they seem to be grappling with are actually talked about in here, about how we are very different and we're doing things. So I'm sure Mr. Ramsey would love to get a copy of that from us, Mayor. So if I can get an undertaking from the office to do that, I won't bother moving it as an amendment.
I'm sure that we can have a copy of it for Mr. Ramsey when he. Yeah.
It's a good read.
No
document.
problems. Yes, Councillor Temby.
I think that the strategy with the schools is more about helping the children learn about growing in their own homes. So they're taking seeds home to their own homes, which is flowing on to their family and to their friends.
Yeah, they are making garden beds at school and doing growing as well.
I think that's a great thing. But just getting back to Councillor Jessop's thoughts about evaluation and progress and understanding what the inhibitors are and opportunities for continuing improvement. I note that there's the Huon Valley Food Hub is continuing on, and there's the 12-month plan. Will that be incorporated within that plan is an evaluation mechanism?
If they've got funding, I gather through you, Director, that they'll have to do that anyway, won't they?
Through your Mayor, it all depends on where the funding comes from.
Okay, all right. So we can request, if you would like.
Thank you.
We would like an update.
I think that they're trying to encourage, obviously community buy-in, but it could be a recommendation as part of that process.
So what, you're moving an amendment?
No, I don't think so. I think
no. Okay. No. I thought that's what you meant. Yeah. All right. Right. No problems. Is there any other? No. Councillor Armstrong, would you like to have a closing statement? No, thank you. Okie dokie. All right. Well, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Agenda item 16.012/23, financial report. I refer councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move a motion? Councillor Campbell-Smith, and a seconder, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Campbell-Smith, would you like to speak to the motion?
Only briefly, Mayor, just to thank the Director for a very detailed report and for keeping us fully abreast throughout the year, and training us and being patient with us in our misunderstandings as we as we've navigated the finances, and pleased to see that we've actually ended, or we're forecast to end the year on a slightly better position than we were expecting to do so at the start.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions or statements? Yes, Councillor
So
Jessup?
just to be clear, this is potentially a real $300,000 cash saving. Is that right? Not a phantom one, Director?
That's correct.
All right. Okay. So, anybody, any other questions or anything of the... No? Okay. Councillor Campbell-Smith, would you like to have a close? Okay. All right. Well, I'll put the motion forward. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Closed session 19.028/23. We're about to move into closed council, so I'd like to thank the gallery tonight for attending and those watching at home. The next meeting of the ordinary meeting of council is Wednesday the 26th of July at 6 p.m. Yep. The recommendation is that the meeting now be closed to the public at pursuant to Regulation 15 of the Meeting Procedures Regulation to discuss the following matters. I've got them there. Do I have a councillor to move a motion to go into closed? Councillor Jessup and Councillor Burgess. Do I have to vote on that? Yep. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors. The motion is carried. I advise that in accordance with the Yuan Valley Council's audio recording of council meeting policy, recording of the open session of the council meeting ceases at